and welcome to another episode of Doug Formative. Today I'm going to show you how to recreate this reflective text design in Inkscape. This is going to be a pretty short video because there's not really a whole lot involved in making this design, but it can be very effective in certain situations. So I think it's a cool trick to learn how to do, and let's go ahead and jump right in. Now when you open Inkscape, you usually have this page here in the middle. Now if you don't want to work with this page here, you can get rid of it very easily, but before I show you how to do that, if you want to keep the page there but you want to make it a little bit bigger, a cool little keyboard shortcut is if you hit the number 5 on your number pad, it will zoom in to fit into your canvas here, so you can keep it centered, and that'll work anytime. So if for some reason you ended up creating a design and it's all the way down here for whatever reason and you're trying to get things recentered, just hit the number 5 and you can always get back to your page over here. So I thought that was a cool little trick that I wanted to share with you guys. But if you want to get rid of the paper, you can go up to File, Document Properties, and down here where it says Border, just uncheck the box that says Show Page Border and you can get rid of it very easily. Now I like to work in pixels, so you can change your display units to pixels up here, and same thing here. But this window right here only affects the size of that page border, so you can leave that alone if you want to. But we can go ahead and close out of that window, and let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is create the text that we're going to use. So come over here, grab your text tool, click anywhere on the canvas, and type the word that you want to work with. I'm just going to type in the word reflection because I think that's appropriate for this specific tutorial. And now we want to make this bigger so we can see what we're working with. There's 2 different ways we can do that. You can either come up here and change your font size, but because we're working with vector images here, all you need to do is grab your selector tool, hold Control, and click and drag out any of these arrows to make this bigger. And the way the reason we can do that is because it's a really high quality image. So no matter how big we make this, it's going to be a high quality, clean looking image. Look how sharp that curve is. Every aspect of this thing is really high quality, and you don't have to worry about it being pixelated the more you zoom in, like you do with certain other programs that you might have used before. I'm not a big fan of this specific font, so I'm going to change it to something different. So let me grab my text tool again and come up here to the different fonts that we have. And if you have this window open, you can click on any font that you have in this window, and if you don't like that, what you could do is just hit the arrow down and it will cycle through the different text or different fonts that you have, instead of you having to go back to that window and click on each one individually, which can be very, very time consuming. Now I saw one here that I liked. I think this one's cool, but I'm not a fan of how the F bleeds into the letter L right there. Now what we can do is you can fix that, and I think I'd prefer this if it was bold. So let's see if bold is an option up here. It is. Yeah, I would definitely prefer it to be like that. Okay, so this is good because I can show you a different tool when you're working with text here. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to turn this text into a path by coming up here to Path and going to Object to Path. And now we want to isolate each individual letter so we can move them around individually. And with this selected, just go to Object and Ungroup. Or if you want to know the keyboard shortcut for that, you can hold Control, Shift, and then hit the letter G on your keyboard, and that will ungroup any objects that are grouped together. Now what I want to do is I want to move these letters a little bit closer together, but I want to move the F and the L a little bit further apart so they're not touching like that. Now what we can do is grab our selection tool by hitting S on the keyboard and then just click anywhere outside of the text to deselect everything. And now what we want to do is let's go ahead and start with the letter R here. I'm going to click on that, hold Control, I'm going to click and drag this over towards the E. And just to get it a little bit closer, I don't want them overlapping or anything. That's pretty good right there. Now you're going to hold Shift click on the letter E, hold Control, click and drag both of those over just to get them, try to, give them the same, like an equal amount of space in between each letter. And one thing that you want to do is make sure you have snapping turned off. I didn't do that yet, because what can happen is once you get within a certain distance of the letters, it will try to like lock onto the edge, and you won't get the look that you want. Alright, so we're going to hold Shift, click on the letter F, and actually I'm going to back off with these letters so it creates a gap between the F and the L. So I'm going to hold Control, click on the F, and then just drag this out. And I don't want to go too far away from the F and the L because it will create a weird looking unnatural gap between these two. But that looks pretty good right there. Let's hold Shift, click on the letter L, hold Control, click, and then just drag that closer to the E. And if you're on a desktop and you're using a mouse with the mouse wheel, or the scroll wheel, you can just click in on that scroll wheel and you can drag your canvas anywhere, so you can make sure that whatever you're working on is in the middle of the canvas here. So it's just easier to work that way. So let's hold Shift, click on the letter E, hold Control, click and drag this over, and just do that for each letter until you get the spacing exactly where you want it to be. And that takes no time at all. Alright, looks like we are done. I definitely like that a lot better. I'm not a huge fan of this L. It's just something weird about the way that this is spaced out, but there's only so much you can do when you have a pre-done font design. But I don't think that's gonna affect the total design aspect of what we're trying to do here. Alright, so the next step is we want to create this where it looks like you have a reflective section on the top portion of this text. But before we do that, let's go ahead and change the color of it. I want the text to be, actually we need to create a union. So we're done editing these. We don't need them to be individual letters anymore. So if you just click and drag over the entire thing so all these are selected, make sure that they're still ungrouped like this. And then we're going to go to Path and then Union. And now it's going to be treated like it's one solid object. So now we can click anywhere on this word and it will select the entire thing. And I want to use a shade of blue because I think that'll look good for this tutorial. I kind of like that color right there, but you can pick whatever color you want. Actually, that one looks pretty cool too. Alright, so once you have the color that you want, what you want to do is click over here and grab your rectangles and squares tool. And now you want to create a rectangle that goes over the top half of your text. And now you want to lower the opacity by coming over here to your fill and stroke menu. And if you don't have fill and stroke over here in this window, just come up here and click on this little box that looks like a square with a paintbrush in it, and you'll get your fill and stroke menu. Now in your fill and stroke, at the bottom of this menu you have your opacity. Let's drop that opacity down just so you can see through the box that you've just created, and you can see what you're working with. And if you want to make that box a different color so you have some contrast, you can. That's entirely up to you, whatever's easier for you. Now we want to turn this box into a path by going to Path, Object to Path, and now we want to go over here and select this Edit Paths by Nodes tool. And what this is going to allow us to do is create a curved line on the bottom of this box that's going to represent that shape that we're going to be working with. So if you just hover your cursor, your arrow over that line until you see that hand tool, you can just click and drag this line up wherever you want it to be. And I just want like a nice flowy curve that's going across this text. And you can always move this node up and down If you want to move it straight up and down, you can hold control, and that way you can just move it straight up and down until you get it exactly where you want. And if you notice, anytime you click on any of these nodes here, you'll get this handle that you can click and affect this this curve that way as well. And you can get pretty detailed with the curve and the angle and all that stuff. Now, we don't want to put too much thought into that. You know, I think that's a good flowing curve right there. And now what we want to do, grab your selector tool by hitting S on the keyboard. And what we want to do is duplicate this text here by holding control and hitting the letter D, which we actually should have done that first, but that's okay. Now grab this square that you just created here, and let's move this back to the top by clicking this button up here that says raise selection to the top. And now we're going to hold shift, click on that duplicated text that you just created, and you're going to go up to path and hit intersection. And no, you can't see anything happened right then. If you select any other color down here in the palette, you can see that you created a new shape that directly matches the text there. But what we want to do is, you don't want it to be a different color. You want to create a gradient where it fades from white to nothing, to where it blends in with the original color underneath. So what we can do is, you can go ahead and make that white. Now what you want to do is come over to your fill and stroke menu, go to under your fill tab, you want to select linear gradient. And as you can see, you have white fading into nothing basically, and that's why you can see through it to the original blue. Now you need to grab your gradient tool so you can adjust the angle of that gradient. So just hit letter G on your keyboard, and then you'll see you have your little gradient handle over here. And now you can adjust where this gradient lies. So this is the side that has the white on it, and you want that to be towards the middle, but you want that to be on the bottom. So you can put it right there for now, and then grab this other one here. And if you hold control, once you get over to this area, it'll lock it in, so you can have a vertical handle. And then you can drag this up and out, however far you want it to go. And you can play with both of these until you're happy with the effect. The closer you bring these two handles together, the more drastic of a gradient you'll see, where it starts out pretty bright and then fades into the blue fairly quickly. And that's, that looks, we're about where we want to be there. But you make it exactly the way that you want to. That's entirely up to you. So the next step is we're going to click on the text, not the gradient portion, just the text itself. And we want to duplicate this again by holding control and hitting D on the keyboard. And now you want to flip that upside down by hitting the letter V on the keyboard, which does a vertical flip. And now with that selected, hold control, click, and drag this down. And at this point, you could turn snapping back on by coming over here and clicking on this. And if you click and drag this up, depending on which snapping you have, you kind of want to snap to paths, and it should lock on to the bottom of the text. That way it looks like it's a direct reflection, like it's sitting on the ground on a reflective surface, and you're looking at the reflection directly here. If for some reason your text doesn't line up, like it doesn't match each letter perfectly, what you could do is click on this text, hold shift, click on this other text, and then you could go to align and distribute and click on this center on vertical axis, and that will make sure that both of these are aligned perfectly. So the next step is we want to turn this reflected text into a gradient, similar to what we did here, but we're not going to add a color to it. We're just going to have it fade from blue to nothing. So let's go ahead and go over to our fill and stroke menu, click on linear gradient, grab your gradient tool by hitting the letter G on the keyboard, and this side has the blue, this side fades into nothing. We want the blue to be at the top, and you can turn off snapping because it's gonna give us a hard time otherwise. And then we can grab our other handle, hold control, and then make sure that you have a vertical handle here. And you know, this is another area where you can just play with it. You know, you don't want to have too solid of a blue here because it's not going to look believable as a reflection. You want it to be lighter than the original text. And this is where you can really get either picky or artistic, whatever you want to call it. But you want it fading out so you're not going to be able to see the top of the letters, because in a natural setting you're probably not going to be able to. You know, and that's looking pretty good right there. So if you grab your selector tool, you can just click anywhere off of this so you can see what that looks like. Now if you want to see what it looks like with a black background, you could either draw a box around the text or you can change your background to black. But if you're trying to save this and use it for something and you want to have a black background, you want to create an object that has the black background, so it will give you one. If you just have the background saved as black, when you export the image, it's not going to export this with that. You're just going to see the text itself. So let's go over here and grab our rectangle tool, and then just click and drag over this image. Now we want to change that to black by coming over here, clicking on that, and then we want to bring up the opacity all the way. And we want to move this box down to the bottom. So grab your selector tool again, click on this button that says lower selection to the bottom. So now you can see what this looks like on a black background. And you want to make sure that this is centered. So with this box selected, hold shift, click on this original text here, and then click up here, center on vertical axis, and then you can click center on horizontal axis too. And that way the original text is centered in the box and you see the reflection showing up underneath it. And that is it, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything else that you want to learn. Don't forget to check out my other YouTube channel, DC Best Ever, for life hacks, you know, food tips, things of that nature. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.